Hey everybody, I'm Rick Gerke, Management Systems Auditor, Educator, and Consultant, coming to you from Chattanooga, Tennessee. This is the beginning of a brand new series on standards and implementation, and I'm going to talk about some of the things I've learned over a couple of decades of using these standards, and I'm hoping that you might be able to find a few ideas that you can use in your own work. To start things off today, I want to talk about a big event in our industry, which is the September 15th release of the much anticipated, new and improved ISO 14001-2015. Next week, I get to go do my very first audit to the requirements of this revised standard, so I'm pretty excited. This revision to ISO 14001 brings some significant changes with new challenges and new opportunities. Chances are, if you're watching this, you already know the management system basics, so I'm going to be focusing on the details. One of the things that I've heard a lot of questions about since we started looking at the early drafts of the new standard is context. Okay, so now what? Let's take a look at Section 4.1 of the standard. Section 4.1, Understanding the Organization and its Context. The organization shall determine external and internal issues that are relevant to its purpose and that affect its ability to achieve the intended outcomes of its environmental management systems. Such issues shall include environmental conditions being affected by or capable of affecting the organization. The standard doesn't come out and give us a nice, neat definition for the word context like it does for a lot of other key terms, so let's borrow one from another source. I like Merriam-Webster's online dictionary, which defines context as the situation in which something happens, or the group of conditions that exist where and when something happens. So, what is our situation as an organization? What are the conditions? Remember that Section 4.1 of the standard requires us to determine the environmental conditions being affected by or capable of affecting our organization, and the standard does provide a definition for environmental conditions. Let's take a look at that. Section 3.2.3 defines an environmental condition as a state or characteristic of the environment as determined at a certain point in time. This is just a side note here. If you're using these standards, please, I implore you, I beg you, read the definitions and use them because they're very important. So, to identify these internal and external conditions that make up our context, let's take a look first at some environmental conditions. Just a few of the environmental conditions we'd consider would be things like climate, air and water quality, natural resources, and biodiversity. A good comprehensive study is going to give us a lot longer list. Those are just a few examples, but that's just a piece of it. Next, let's look at some other external conditions that make up part of our context. Just a few of the external conditions are things like our society, political climate, regulations, the technology available, the economy, and of course, our competitors. The next big piece, and typically the one over which we have the greatest amount of control, is our internal conditions. Let's take a look at a few of those. Some of the organization's internal conditions include our people, our products and services, our business strategy, the culture of the organization, and of course, our finances. Before we start cataloging all these conditions that make up our context, we should look ahead into the standard and find out where we're going to be using the information. For example, the standard requires us to consider context when we're establishing our policy, setting objectives, and making commitments. Remember that these conditions are mostly dynamic. They're going to change over time, so whatever vehicle we use to capture all this information, we need to make sure that it's well controlled within the system, reviewed regularly, and remains alive, valid, and useful. All right, everybody, that's it for today, and thanks for watching. Next time, we'll look at a way we can use this information on our context, combined with the principles of sustainability, to set some meaningful objectives for enhancing our environmental performance. Until then, be safe, be green, and be happy.